A very warm welcome to you from Equa Marketing. This presentation is brought to you by Equa.com, a leader in digital marketing.
Welcome to another episode of Growing Dentist. Today I have the person who inspired me to start the podcast Growing Dentist. His name is Jurgen Rudolph, and he is the founder of JKR Financial. And obviously he runs a podcast, or he hosts a podcast called Open Roll Podcast. And how many people do you have listening to it right now?
Oh, first of all, thanks for inviting me on the show. And I think, Naren, we're at 13,000. We're close, like just under 13,000. And it's an interesting journey when you see the numbers come in. And I guess part of it is seeing the numbers, people downloading your episodes. But part of it is the stuff you learn, because you're constantly exploring, how do I put out a better show? How do I do this? Or, make it better. I feel nervous being on this side of the microphone.
You know what? You got me going. So, definitely you're doing something right. I mean, you inspired me to want to do it myself. Before we get into kind of some meaty stuff, can you kind of tell me a little bit about your journey and perhaps how you got into podcasting? Just curious, because, I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear how you did it, because, you run a business, a traditional business, but what you're doing is so untraditional. I haven't heard of any other financial planner who has his own podcast series with 13,000, people listening to it is it a weekly podcast?
Weekly podcast.
Weekly.
70 episodes have gone out. You did number 70.
Oh, wow.
Thank you for doing that. But yeah, my journey, I've always liked, actually one of the guests on my show was who got me into it. We were working together as financial planners at this company. It's not even around anymore, London Life. This is back in 92. And he comes into the boardroom. Remember, picture this. Back in the old days, cubicles, boardrooms. I know it's not your world. You don't have that. But he goes, I watched this thing on TV last night where they have a cage. And these two guys go in this cage and they fight. And he brought the video in and we watched it. And we're like, wow, is that ever interesting?
Right.
First UFC.
Wow.
So fast forward, Joe Rogan. So I start following the UFC, and Joe Rogan has a podcast, so I start listening to his podcast, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I go away on vacation, and part of this new world is I didn't want to have cable TV anymore.
Right.
So I started listening to podcasts more. I bought an Apple TV. Well, the iTunes podcast is one of the icons on Apple TV, so I start listening to podcasts on the Apple TV. And where I'm going with my long story here is John Lee Dumas has a podcast called Entrepreneurial on Fire. And it's a daily podcast with just interesting people that come on, very positive ideas, and they're entrepreneurs. And his whole thing about that podcast is he's marketing how to do a podcast. So after listening to it a few times, I went, hey, I can do a podcast.
Right.
And I subscribed to his Podcaster's Paradise, and it's an online tutorial videos or a tutorial on how to build your podcast. And I remember I went to Kim. We've worked together for 17, 18 years. And I go, we're going to do a podcast. This was about a year and a half ago. And she took over the editing part of it, the putting it together. And I just said, okay, I'll find the guests and we'll interview them and get it out there. And then we learned a whole lot more about social media by doing that. And yeah, it's been a great journey.
That's amazing. So I'm going to definitely check out Podcaster's Paradise. Definitely. I think that looks like an awesome resource for anybody who's looking at learning more about podcasting. Now, tell me a little bit about some of your best episodes and kind of why do you feel that way? Both from your point of view and also from your audience point of view. I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, I always say the little brain in my head's going to crash thinking of all the different, the experiences you get from interviewing that guest. And there's a high afterwards too. You finish the podcast, the person leaves, you're like, that was a great guy. What a great, Vintage Soul Geek yesterday. It was because it's right in my mind. It was the latest episode we did before you came in. It was yesterday.
Right.
And yeah, just hearing his journey and how, through 3 generations, he put together his bricks and mortars of vintage clothing. And hearing that story, so that's one of the episodes that comes to mind. Jason Powell, It was another one. That was like episode 20, going back almost a year ago. He's a black belt. He teaches martial arts at an academy I go to as a black belt. And he doesn't fit the role really as an entrepreneur. He works for a big company as their, I guess he manages their people. And I'm sure he's having a little laugh at how I described that, because he works with young offenders and things like that. So he's not truly an entrepreneur, but the podcast was about moving your body and just
Right.
doing something, like whether going to a martial arts studio down the road or going for a walk, but just getting that body moving and, you know, not just waiting around to get old. Those are two of the episodes that come to my mind. And it's funny, as we're doing this interview, Kim's sitting next to me. I know she's probably got like 20 episodes she just wants to fire in.
I'm on.
You're on. I'm looking over at you. What's the one that comes?
The Bliss Kitchen one.
Bliss Kitchen.
Oh my goodness. Those girls were awesome.
You didn't know you were going to get both of us on the show here. Sorry.
That's awesome.
Well, they were so inspirational. They just had such a great attitude and such a fantastic story. And anytime Donnie is on, Donnie is such a fun guest.
Oh, Donnie Wanch,
to talk
MMA
to.
fighter.
Oh, right.
Donnie is always fun to talk to. He is just a fantastic guest.
Donnie's episodes you can find on ours, because you just look down. We've got clean, like you'll find when with your podcast, you'll have clean lyrics, so you don't. But if you have anything explicit, you have to put the E on.
All right.
So his episodes on iTunes, you can just find. You just look for. They're only one that's marked with an E.
Right. How would somebody find it? Is there a website for Open Roll Podcast, or is that something?
openroll.org.
Openroll.org. That's OPEN openroll.org. Okay, perfect.
You know, you're big on the Colby, and things always, you know, mold us in life. And through martial arts, where I came up with the name for the podcast was I wasn't sure what to call it, and I wanted to have some openings that if I have someone that's not an entrepreneur on there, that hey, it's just an open roll. It's like it's a free session. If someone's got an idea, I don't want to be limited to the name of my podcast that I can't bring them on, because I was at the time putting it together saying it's for the micro entrepreneur. He may get an idea from someone that's not a micro entrepreneur. So just have an open roll. Everyone bring their own skills, and someone's going to get something out of it.
Absolutely. You know, let me kind of shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about dentists and some of the things that they might be interested in. A couple of things you said that kind of struck me is that I noticed many of my clients, I mean, all of my clients are doctors, dermatologists, dentists, and so forth. They're very health conscious. You know, like doctors are the most health conscious group that I have seen. They eat healthy, they take care of themselves, they exercise, they are active. And obviously you are very active. You are into martial arts. You talked about some of your guests who inspire you, who are obviously all very active people. I would like you to share your thoughts on, you know, remember the listeners here are dentists. So your thoughts on how this might help them personally. Like, do you have any pointers for them personally and for their patients or clients? Like any advice or any thoughts around health that you think people might find interesting?
One of the for my first trip to Brazil, I went down there to go to a camp. It was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I just started, and you know, Jeff Joslin was going. It's the academy I train at. He was going down to fight in the World Championships in Rio de Janeiro, and the club had like a camp in another town. So on that trip, the academy we were training at in Rio de Janeiro, they had they would do like normal classes like here, but they had this warm up they would do. It was called animal biotics.
All right.
And it was a breathing and then just moving your hips and your body on the mat, whether you walk down the mat like a monkey, whether you walk down like a tiger, also in a sitting position. You can Google, you know, on the internet, it'll come up under animal gymnastics, animal movements, anything like that will give you an idea. But, you know, I guess where I'm going with this is if that person, you've got all different levels of ability. And one of them is just being able to pull yourself up off the floor. Like if you're lying on the floor, can you get up off the floor? And if you can do these movements, you'll get up off the floor. And then the next step is, well, what about if you're in a martial art, like a grappling type sport? Well, you can't lift weights to get yourself in shape to wrestle, really. It's different muscles that you use. So these movements help you in a sport like martial arts. So yeah, I don't go to the gym. I just walk around like a monkey, and I teach a class on Fridays just how to move. It's outside my vertical of financial planning.
Right.
However, I encourage that to people. Do something outside your
comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right. It's called animal gymnastics. That's the word I should go with.
That's the one that's been branded.
Right.
The person I went to was Orlando Connie, and he's the one who taught the guy who puts the animal gymnastics out.
Right.
But yeah, if you Google anything with animal gymnastics, it's going to come up with videos.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I assume you work with doctors in your business, in your practice, dentists, physicians, and so forth. What is it that you kind of have learned or noticed when it comes to wealth and how they think about wealth, and maybe even we'll get into this a little bit more. Different stages of life, people who are just starting out versus people maybe with a young family, 5-10 years in practice, versus people are about to retire and somewhere in between. Like, how do they think about wealth, and how do they think about their future, and what kind of conversations do you have with them? Just kind of curious, because one of the things I think my audience would really appreciate is the wisdom of somebody who has talked to a lot of people like them and have some insights.
Back in May, I had the honor of speaking at a symposium. I guess it was their education day for Mac Ortho.
All right.
And I talked a lot about the podcast. So I was brought up there as a financial planner. Damn, the podcast is a lot more interesting to talk about than stacking money in a corner. Except what I would take away, because I've got some questions.
Right.
I didn't use the full 20-minute talking. It was about 15 minutes. So there was about 5 minutes of questions coming up. And residents, a question would be, what about debt?
Right.
Because you most times leave with
massive debt.
Massive debt. So there's that to deal with. The doctors themselves, one thing that surprised me is the low amount of money they get paid for a surgery. Like, everyone thinks doctors are paid a lot of money. I mean, I had my orthopedic or my knee replaced. I didn't know a doctor only gets paid $800 to do a knee surgery.
Wow.
Like, damn, I'm thinking you should be getting about 10 grand for that thing.
Right.
Those are my knees to move
exactly.
around. But I digress and go off on a side street on my answer here. But, what I'm noticing is now, as you get the more established doctor, wants those investments that are going to create sustainability of his income later.
So first thing you mentioned is debt, because they come out of school with massive debt. So how do they think about debt? How do they manage their debt? The second thing you're mentioning is how do they create an income stream even when they stop working with their hands, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, and maybe you just question what's available to you now. Maybe,
right.
A lot of things I see from what I bring in the financial planning part of it is a lot of questions. Like, are you doing any scientific research and experimental development credits? Are you getting any of that? Have you taken a surgery and, through your trial and error, brought it down 10 seconds or something? I'm not a specialist in that field, but those specialists will get their money back. So part of what I think, and it's a lot of verticals are going this way, it's more of a step back, look down, and take a holistic view and say, are you missing a bit of money that you should be getting for some of the experiment or the research you're doing? And
right.
So you generate that money that comes in. Now you can invest that in an investment property, or you can put that into your tax-free savings account, or pension plan.
Right. So you correct me if I'm wrong. So you're saying almost compartmentalizing both your income and savings or your investments. So you have a broader kind of a strategy. So for example, I'm making this up, thinking about a dentist. Let's say I just started doing Invisaligns, right? And I have that separate part of my business. So maybe say, okay, I'm going to take all this extra money I'm getting from Invisalign, and instead of just putting it back in and kind of circulating it and kind of not really benefiting from it, take that income or the profit from that new piece of my business and allocate it to some kind of an investment. It's just a small amount, but over time it could build up.
Yeah, well, yeah, boy, as a doctor entrepreneur, there's so many different ways you can use that money. One of your biggest returns is always private equity, reinvesting back in yourself.
Right.
So you're always going to get a higher return on yourself. However, you're really freelancing because you're always dependent on that, you being in that business.
Right.
But as you keep, buying the better chair or buying the better equipment or reinvesting, that is a better return than you're going to get putting it in your XYZ mutual fund.
Right.
So it's going to drive you crazy as the entrepreneur that you're not making as much money giving your money to JKR Financial.
Right.
Because your perception is it's got to be the same. Well, it's not the same. You're pulling that money out of the practice to keep it away from you because later it's going to be a generator of income when your practice isn't.
Right.
And maybe you're going to do that with the building your practice is in. You're going to purchase that, and that's an investment property. Or, the house next to the house you live in, you're going to eventually buy maybe something in the neighborhood to rent out. Or
right.
I don't. Everyone's journey is how they want to put it together. But something a lot of people I like to bring their attention to, and I draw it in circles, is alternative investments, and not in the old day of a hedge fund. More. I'll give you an example. A party rental place that does the tents, investing in a drone, because a drone can go up and fly through the tents and give a visual of their business. So that's an alternative investment that you're buying into that maybe is an incubator that you can put all those shots out on a social media that builds your network up in a business that wasn't there before.
Makes sense. So, one of the things that you touched on that I think is very, very important is a lot of doctors don't have a framework to make those decisions. Like, they just don't consciously make those decisions. Like, they keep buying new stuff, and there's a new salesperson who says, oh, this is brand new equipment, and they don't do the math and figure out how much it's costing me and how much am I going to make out of it, what assumptions have to be true for me to make the money. So it's almost like they're driving the car, but they don't have a dashboard that tells them they're speeding or they're going too slow or that their engine oil is going to run out. One particular doctor I can think of, brilliant doctor, amazing results, amazing everything, but she's $1 million in the hole, and it's not just like we talk about overnight success story 10 years in the making. It's not like overnight failure. It really is failure 10 years in the making because she made lots of bad decisions. Bad hires, bad investments, bad ... you name it. Even relationships, even the people she hired. So what I'm hearing from you is kind of, doctors might really benefit from having a structured way of thinking about what am I doing with my money. Internal is okay, but even that you need a structured way to evaluate it. And even external, again, if you don't put all your eggs in one basket, that's the second thing I'm hearing from you. Like have a balanced, just like you have a balanced life, have a balanced view of how to use your money, both to create wealth by investing in your practice, but also to create wealth outside of your practice. And then the third thing I'm hearing from you is, do what you love as well, right? So if you hate something, then don't get into it because you're not going to be inspired by it, you're not going to be engaged with it, and they're going to kind of forget about it, and then that's going to cause problems. So
that's such a good point. Just because your doctor friend that you went through Harvard with bought investment properties, and you do not want to do plumbing at 2 a.m. on a weekend because someone's calling you, maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you're going to buy something else, but just a generator of income that's different than everything else, and to view it like the table legs, like each one's your investment. And if you only got one leg, you're not going to have a very balanced investment portfolio. So you want to have a few more legs on your table of income streams coming in. Right.
So can you tell me some examples of different doctors who have taken different journeys and kind of how they looked at their wealth and their future, and how do they kind of go about creating that future they wanted for their families and themselves?
Can I give you the answer you weren't expecting?
Go ahead.
So when I spoke in May at McMaster Orthopedic Surgeons Symposium Day, the gentleman on before me, I don't know his name. Damn, he was so cool. And it was Why You Should was the topic. And he talked about taking a year, I think it was a full year off being a doctor to travel the world.
Wow.
And he gave all the reasons why you can't do it. And he went with his family and 2 kids. And you know when you're in that room with someone that you just got a good vibe off of and you're talking and you're like, wow, that is really neat. Now he's right back, running his crazy orthopedic, they go crazy, I guess. There's so many different things going on there.
Right.
But, it's very hectic. And he's back running that. Nothing's changed. He didn't fall off the planet and not survive. So maybe that's one of the best investments is that year off, taking that sabbatical, and forget about your here's me, the financial planner, saying, yeah, maybe you don't need to put it all in your tax-free savings account, buy the 13 properties. Maybe you need just to take a year off, and that'll get you everything anyways.
That's amazing. So when we look at creating a future, you don't have to follow the standard path. You could kind of customize it, and you could make it your own. And you're right, maybe that taking that year off is the best thing you could do for yourself and your family. You reminded me of one of my clients who's a dentist, and he went to, I think, where he was originally from, a country in South America, for a year and a half, and he took his entire family, and he had his practice running when he was gone, and he kind of would remote in and just check in on things. And they had an amazing time. I mean, they learned the local languages, they lived in a village. It's just unbelievable stuff. And obviously he helped out the people in that village, and he did dentistry for them, and I think talking to him, it was a huge risk, at least it looked like it, but like you said, the world didn't end, and his practice didn't die, and nothing happened, and his entire family and his kids and his wife, they were all so much richer because they decided to do that. And so sometimes maybe you're right, take that uncharted path and take that time off.
It'll make your next blog posts a lot more interesting.
Something to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's amazing. And that's the last thing I would expect from a financial planner. Like, tell me that don't do what you're supposed to do and do something different. That's awesome. That's you think in a very different way. That's amazing.
Well, you're going to make it back anyways. It was just due.
Right. I mean, life is a long journey, right? That 1 year is not going to make any difference.
Yeah, play the long game.
Exactly. Play the long game. I would like to talk to you a lot more, but maybe we could do one more episode and maybe get more detail into one of the topics. But I would like to end this episode with that last piece of advice: play the long game. Coming from a financial advisor who has worked with many entrepreneurs and doctors, and I mean, to be honest, doctors are entrepreneurs, right? They're in private practice and they're on their own.
That's true. That's a good way of looking at it. A very specialized entrepreneur.
Right.
Yeah.
Who has an expertise and a skill set, but at the end of the day, they're on their own. So what they do and how they do it will determine their future and the decisions they make. So thank you very much, Jurgen, for spending time with me and obviously inspiring me to start this podcast.
Yeah, Naren, thanks for the kind words and having me on the show and actually making me have to think of what it's like. You've helped me grow for my podcast because this is the first time I've been interviewed for a show. I just went in and just jumped in. So yeah, I think I mentioned that before. I just thank you. And I hope to be back again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And share this podcast by going to growingdentist.com. And it's episode number 2.